From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
War and Peace, the abridged edition. Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois. A trade war broke out today between the United States and its neighbors after President Trump threatened Canada and Mexico with new tariffs, and they retaliated.
But hours later, it was over before a single tariff was fired across any border. Financial markets got rattled, though. More about that in a moment.
Trump's new tariffs on imports from China are still set to begin tomorrow. Jason Allen in Laredo, Texas, reports American businesses are getting ready to pass along their higher costs to consumers. Jason.
Yeah, behind me is one of the bridges that carries as many as 20,000 trucks a day between the U.S. and Mexico. Now, it's quieter tonight because it's a holiday over in Mexico, but Border Protection and importers told me traffic has been heavier recently as retailers try to get ahead of higher prices.
At the Altoon and Lube in Laredo, Texas.
We'll get it back to you with pricing, okay?
Manager Luis Guzman has been stocking as many oil filters, brake pads, and engine parts as he can, trying to beat the price increases 25% tariffs could bring.
How many of the parts you get are probably coming from manufacturers in Mexico?
If I want to say a rough estimate, maybe a good 60%, 50% parts come from there.
Across town, Rick Laurel's warehouse has been filling up for weeks with products such as makeup, cardboard tubing, cement mixers, all from Mexico.
Now it's going to get even more full because now we have a 30-day window that both presidents just talked.
So you don't expect it to go back to normal. You think they'll try to keep moving goods as fast as they can?
With an extension of just 30 days, that doesn't push anything. The only thing it does is pushes the line, 30 more days.
It doesn't erase the uncertainty.
It doesn't erase the uncertainty.
Laredo Mayor Victor Trevino says that uncertainty is something new for this city.
That's what makes it different, and that's what makes it a little bit worrisome. This is what I think it's like a playing chicken. Who's going to move first? Who's going to give way first? We're the largest port in the United States. About 40% of all the merchandise that goes into the U.S. passes through here. So that's significant.
Even a small impact to a trade corridor where $300 billion in goods move through every year is something that Luis Guzman and his customers can't afford.
So right now I want to be in a market where I'm going to be competitive with my prices, and I want to be actually good to be good friendly budget. But with these tariffs, I don't know if I can even be friendly budget because we don't know how much they're going to be raising up on my prices.
Leading up to this, local officials told me they were preparing for this really like an emergency. They were talking to their counterparts in Mexico, knowing there isn't a whole lot they could do about it, but really just wanted to be prepared for what was ahead.
Jason, what was Luis Guzman going to do if this tariff did happen with prices as he passed them on to customers?
What I heard from businesses today, John, is they weren't really going to be able to absorb much of this increased cost. For instance, at his shop, if he was able to still offer a car part at the same price, he was going to find somewhere else he could make it up. He was already looking at maybe increasing his hourly labor costs in order to make it up.
Jason, when you say ripple effect, what would that actually look like for Americans living there along the border?
So let's take Laredo as an example. If goods come through here and they're higher prices, maybe people start buying less. That means there's less demand. There's less shipping that happens. That leads to impacts to jobs, state revenues as well. You can see the ripple effect. And remember back to the pandemic, this is a very complex system, Maurice. It is not something that is unraveled easily.
And briefly, Jason, is anybody breathing a sigh of relief now that the trade war has been paused?
Maybe for a day, John, but this really showed them they don't know what to expect. So at the auto shop, they've got empty shelves. They're going to try to fill them because they don't know what happens in 30 days.
Jason Allen in Laredo. Thank you, Jason.
Now let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. So Kelly, let's take a stroll here through the economic case that Donald Trump is making for slapping tariffs.
Okay, so big driver is getting better trade relationships. So let's look at some numbers. It's 2023. The U.S. sells $354 billion in goods to Canada, $323 billion to Mexico. That same year, though, they bought $419 billion from Canada and $475 billion from Mexico. So that means there's a trade deficit of $64 billion with Canada and $153 billion with Mexico.
And you definitely don't want to be on the short end of a trade deficit.
No, economically, you want them to rely on you versus you relying on them.
Okay, in practical terms, what does it look like when we slap a tariff on an actual item, an everyday item.
So let's look at a car battery manufactured in Canada, and then a car company buys it, brings it into the U.S., they sell it to a repair shop, and then ultimately a customer. But if there is a tariff, that same U.S. car company pays an import tax to bring that car battery into the U.S. Then they have to decide how much are they going to pass on to that repair shop. And then ultimately the consumer says, okay, that car battery costs more. Am I going to buy it? Maybe yes, maybe no.
And this is where potential inflation could happen.
Right. It could mean higher prices. It also could mean that car company says, well, maybe I should manufacture that battery in the U.S. And then our trade partners say, well, maybe rather than paying import taxes, I should just do a better trade deal with the U.S.
Three potential outcomes. Kelly O'Grady, thanks so much.
The prospect of a trade war had investors dumping stocks in the early going today. The Dow plunged nearly 350 points in the first half hour in trading, but by the end of the day, it recovered a lot of its losses, closing down 122 points.
Weijia Jiang at the White House now. A lot of ups and downs there today as well, with the tariffs on and off. Now that they're off, Weijia, what did the president get after all of that?
Well, Maurice, President Trump has called tariffs the most beautiful word in the dictionary because he thinks they have such a potent power in negotiating. And tonight, the White House is touting concessions from both Mexico and Canada. So the Mexicans have agreed to send 10,000 soldiers to the border to stop fentanyl trafficking and illegal immigrants. But we should note that in our reporting, it actually shows the vast majority of fentanyl seized at the U.S. southern border is smuggled in by American citizens and other legal travelers on vehicles. Canada is also sending what they call 10,000 frontline personnel to the border and shelling out about $1 billion for choppers and new technology to reinforce it.
Weijia, okay, these tariffs aren't happening. So what happens to all of that income that the president said the tariffs were going to be used for to pay all these wonderful things he said they were going to be used to pay for?
And, John, that is a very long list. But the White House says that these Mexico-Canada tariffs had one specific goal, and that was to convince our neighbors to do more to seal the border from illegal immigrants and drugs. They say that is separate from the so-called universal tariffs that would put a 2.5% global rate on certain fields, such as semiconductors and possibly even cars. Tonight, sources close to Trump say he is still very much considering those.
Weijia Jiang at the White House for us. Thank you, Weijia.
Now some of the top stories from around the world in tonight's evening news roundup, starting with the aftermath of the air ambulance crash Friday in Philadelphia. 4 people are still in the hospital, 2 in critical condition. No word yet on what caused the crash. 1 person on the ground and all 6 on the plane were killed, including a girl from Mexico who had been treated at Shriners Children's Hospital.
Doors were locked at the Washington headquarters of USAID today at the mutual agreement of President Trump and billionaire Elon Musk, whom he's empowered to remake the federal government. USAID, established by President Kennedy and Congress, fights starvation and disease in more than 100 countries, including Sudan, scene of the worst humanitarian crisis on Earth. Deborah Pata will take us there later this week.
And today was the deadline for thousands of FBI agents to fill out a Trump administration questionnaire, asking them what role they played in investigating the January 6th Capitol riot, the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history. CBS's Scott McFarland joins us now. And Scott, the impact of all of this is being felt across the country tonight.
An unprecedented day of turmoil inside the FBI. These agents were asked what role they played in the January 6th investigations, if they searched or interviewed or arrested anybody, raising fears of a purge of agents nationwide. Take a look at this. Our CBS News review found some of these lead January 6 FBI agents are part of joint terrorism task forces in cities nationwide, including New Orleans, the most recently struck city with a terror attack, and others from California to Colorado to Connecticut. There's also this concern that this purge would impact human trafficking task forces, gun groups, and John and Maurice send a chilling message to FBI agents. Be careful what you investigate next and make sure it does not displease President Trump.
So that's filling out the questionnaire. What's the long-term impact here, Scott, for the FBI?
Immediately, there's a 12 p.m. deadline Eastern time tomorrow for the FBI to turn over these names to the U.S. Department of Justice, with the possibility that there are going to be cuts. Also possible lawsuits challenging these firings, if they happen, by attorneys representing FBI agents, but also just a make or break day tomorrow Will the FBI do it? We know this statement from the assistant director for the New York field office shows that they are trying to rally the troops. He says, we find ourselves in the middle of a battle of our own as good people are being walked out of the FBI and others are being targeted because they did their jobs. A demoralizing moment, if nothing else, inside the Bureau.
Scott McFarland for us in Washington. Thank you, Scott.
Still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, Lonnie Quinn with the weather.
And we'll have these other stories as well.
I'm Mark Strassman in Los Angeles. These migrant day laborers are critical to rebuilding this city, but worried they could be deported.
And I'm Chris Van Cleve at Washington's Reagan National Airport. The latest on the investigation into that deadly mid-air collision. Next on the CBS Evening News.
If you have Graves' disease, your eye symptoms could mean something more. That gritty feeling can't be brushed away. Even a little blurry vision can distort things, and something serious may be behind those itchy eyes. Up to 50% of people with Graves could develop a different condition called thyroid eye disease, which should be treated by a different doctor. See an expert. Find a TED eye specialist at isitted.com.
Introducing new Oroxon Gel, the first FDA-cleared ED treatment available without a prescription. Oroxon Gel is clinically proven to work within 10 minutes, so you and your partner can experience the heights of intimacy. New Oroxon ED Treatment Gel.
Is your asthma rescue a dinosaur? Air Supra is the only asthma rescue inhaler FDA approved to treat symptoms and help prevent asthma attacks. Air Supra should not be used as a maintenance treatment for asthma. Get medical help right away if your breathing doesn't improve or worsens, or for serious allergic reactions like rash, mouth or tongue swelling, trouble breathing or swallowing, or chest pain. Using Air Supra more than prescribed could be life-threatening. Serious side effects include increased risk of thrush or infections or heart problems like faster heart rate and higher blood pressure. Ask your doctor if Air Supra is right for you.
Few images we have seen since the mid-air collision have brought home the enormity of the loss as this. 14-year-old Everly Livingston and her 11-year-old sister, Lydia, of Ashburn, Virginia. Their mom texted the photo to a friend right before the plane took off. The faces of innocence.
The sisters and their parents were among the 67 people killed when the plane collided with an Army helicopter near Washington. Chris Van Cleve has the latest on the investigation.
Crews began lifting pieces of the American Airlines regional jet that crashed into the Potomac River after Wednesday's mid-air collision. Among them, the midsection of the plane's mangled and upside-down fuselage, one of the plane's engines, and a wing, as efforts continue to recover all 67 crash victims.
We have positively identified 55 sets of remains. During recovery and salvage operations today, additional human remains were located.
NTSB investigators have accessed the plane's cockpit data recorder, which shows the airliner was flying at about 325 feet around the time of the collision. Deputy Director of Army Aviation, Colonel Mark Ott.
Is there any reason why Army helicopters would be flying above that 200-foot line as it appears in this case?
It's important for us to not speculate, because there are all kinds of reasons that you could deviate from an altitude. You know, something as simple as a flock of birds is in front of you, or you may deviate if you see something that's an obstacle or other threat to your flight.
The black box data also indicates the plane pitched up immediately before impact, perhaps a last-second attempt by the pilots to climb. Airline Captain Laura Einsettler.
What's going on in the cockpit 325 feet up with the runway in sight?
The pilots of the regional jet are going to be fully focused on landing the jet. They're manually flying at that point, focused on the runway, focused on their altitude, their airspeed, their spatial orientation, their descent rate.
The second plane crash Friday in Philadelphia capped the deadliest week for American aviation in more than 2 decades and has rattled the flying public.
What are you telling passengers right now?
We put our lives on the line every day to keep everyone absolutely as safe as we possibly can. So we always want to reassure the passengers and the traveling public that our safety is our absolute #1 priority.
And Chris Van Cleve joins us now. So, Chris, what are pilots telling you about the fact that these two aircraft were so close in the first place? And everybody's wondering, how safe are the skies?
Well, yeah, so fundamentally, two aircraft, even if that helicopter had been at 200 feet, they were too close together. You want at least 1,000 feet of separation there. So what led up to the circumstances? What is the chain of events that put those two aircraft so close together? It won't just be that the helicopter was flying at 325 feet. There will be other factors that led us down the road to disaster here. How safe is the aviation system? It's as safe as it was before this crash. There are layers of safety built in that are still in effect today, the same way they were 2 weeks ago.
Chris Van Cleve in Washington. Thank you, Chris.
Looking at the calendar, we are halfway down through winter.
Looking at the dictionary, winter comes from the old Germanic word meaning time of water. So, Lonnie Quinn, are we in a time of water?
You know what, John? With the atmospheric river setting up, it looks like we are in that time. If you take a look at the globe and you sort of spin it around to our country, the atmospheric river is depicted by that sort of like speckled blue and black line. So it brings in a lot of moisture right now to Northern California. For example, you know, it's been in place for a couple of days already, but the next big bout is going to be tonight. So a place like San Francisco could see 2 inches of rain, but in this key, it's going to be migrating to the south. So it's possible for Los Angeles to maybe pick up to an inch of rain. But California's reservoirs depend on snow. And look at the picture that you see behind me. This is Truckee, California, 6,000 feet. They should be loaded with snow. It's not in place. Now, the mountain peaks in the background, North Star, sure, there's snow there, but we just don't see the snowpack as of right now. Who gets rain, who gets snow? All dictated by the jet stream. North of it, it's very cold. South of it, it's very warm. And it's just pushed way up to the north right now. So look at this. Houston, 2 weeks ago, had 4 inches of snow. Houston tomorrow sets a record at 81 degrees. Every number on this map, a record setter for tomorrow. Sort of a taste of early spring. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Lonnie.
One of President Trump's signature policies could make it harder for Southern California homeowners to rebuild after the fires.
We'll have that story in Eye on America next. Reports the biggest of the Southern California wildfires, the Palisades, is now fully contained. The fire destroyed thousands of homes. Now, as residents look to rebuild, they could face a problem. The president's immigration crackdown could worsen what is already a shortage of construction workers. Mark Strassman is in Pasadena and has tonight's Eye on America.
On this street in North Pasadena, we ran into about a dozen workers volunteering to clear debris. Potential kindling just 2 miles from the Eaton Fire's burn scar. Many of these workers are here illegally. Bernardo Oserio is their crew boss. He migrated from Mexico 36 years ago and in 2021 became a U.S. citizen.
From every single people, they're afraid.
What are they afraid of?
Deportations. People like to work. They want to work. I mean, they want better lives as well.
And there's lots of work to be done.
We can do it without them. We cannot build America without them.
These are the hands that will rebuild Los Angeles.
We found many of those same workers protesting.
Resist injustice.
This is a rally of migrant day laborers. They're critical to the rebuilding of Los Angeles, but worried they won't get that chance because of the Trump administration's aggressive stance toward deporting anyone without legal status.
We will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
In California, 41% of construction workers are immigrants, many of them staying here without legal documents. Under the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, deportation officers can remove most immigrants who are here illegally, even targeting refugee programs and birthright citizenship.
They learn the trade. You cannot just bring new people, and train them. It's going to take years. So, who's going to do it?
Dan Gatsby founded the Los Angeles Builders Association, a trade group for the local construction industry.
Is it realistic that Los Angeles could rebuild what's been lost without
immigrant labor.
It's going to be very difficult. We already have big shortage of home in Los Angeles. I mean, with this on top of it, I mean, good luck.
Gatsby estimates rebuilding Los Angeles could take 20 years and maybe twice as long without the help of immigrant construction labor.
We are essential workers, essential people for the community.
Just like rescuing LA from the flames, rebuilding it will take every available hand. For Eye on America, Mark Strassman in Los Angeles.
It's not just California. The construction industry says it needs to hire 439,000 new workers nationwide this year. According to the latest figures, construction employs a larger share of undocumented workers at 13% than any other industry. In tomorrow's Eye on America, from Newland, North Carolina, as the president talks about scrapping FEMA, victims of Hurricane Helene are still waiting for help. Maurice and I will be back in a moment with Beyonce, more than a little bit country.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Freshpet. It's not dog food, it's food.
It was a big night for Beyonce at the Grammys. She won Album of the Year for the first time and became the first black artist to win Country Album of the Year.
She tipped her cowboy hat metaphorically to Linda Martell, the first black woman to perform solo at Nashville's Grand Ole Opry. And later she told Entertainment Tonight co-host Kevin Frazier how proud she is of her album, Cowboy Carter, which puts a spotlight on the banjo, an instrument with African roots.
I just feel honored to reintroduce some of that history that I think has been lost, and very, very honored that I got the response and the open heart and people welcomed the album. The love I got from the country community tonight really made me feel so seen, and I'm very grateful.
That's the CBS Evening News. I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois. Have a good night.